beginning of the movement, it has been identified as a movement that lacks vision, actually, and lacks leadership. Its main objective was a protest against the situation, against the government, and against the performance of the government. If you asked about the leader of the protest, you won't find any person as identified as a leader. If you ask about the program or the demands, you would find that some of the demands are quite right and some of the demands are quite absurd, like changing the whole regime into a presidential regime, removing all the constitution, removing all the current political players, changing everything that has been brought to Iraq in post-2003. I mean, these are all unrealistic demands. That's why right from the beginning, the movement was considered as a fit of anger, actually, a fit of expression of malcontent against the political leaders. Even if they have succeeded in winning 2 or 3 seats in the parliament, because some of them have already joined other parties, and this is an indicator that they were not independent and they were part of the political parties. And the leaders of the movement, or the persons who were taking the scene and the front lines in the movement, proved that they were unable to influence any political position, whether before they joined the parliament or even now. In the last session that was held by the parliament, they attended the session. There were 20 of them. Not all of them belonged to the Tashreen movement. 3 of them were from the Tashreen movement. They were just watching. They couldn't do anything. It means that they were not organized well. They did not have a clear vision of what they want. And the whole movement was, as I said, a fit of anger in the street and an accumulative rage against the failure of the government to deliver to the people, and to deliver the main services, to deliver some of the expectations that people expected. And as for the economy and the economical issues of politics, I think it is really a very important issue to consider, and very much important to the extent that without the struggle for economical resources, most of the political parties wouldn't have existed. I mean, this is the main incentive behind the movement of 80% of the current political parties. Some of them would say, no, we will do our work, we will continue despite the fact that we will not get any economic or any material gains. But the majority of them, they will not survive without this incentive. I think this might need another session to talk about. The point mentioned by Raman, I think, is very important. Introduce themselves as independents. And there is no one situation or incident where there is an independent person elected or selected for a prime minister's position. None of them was independent, actually, including Mr. Al-Kadhimi. He's not independent. There is a sort of affiliation, whether it is declared or undeclared. I mean, there is always sort of affiliation or connection with a certain power. So there is no independent candidate for any of these key positions, neither the speakership nor the premiership nor the presidentship. And independent political leaders, when they claim they are independent, they run for elections, sooner or later they will be submerged, or they will be associated with other political parties, because they cannot survive simply. They cannot deliver without having a power to lean upon. And this is the case in the previous elections, and we will see this case also in the current parliament. And while Maliki is not a powerful political leader with a veto, it was answered by Mr. Ambassador. People with veto doesn't necessarily entail that they are they are part of the political process, not necessarily. Ayatollah Sistani, although he is not a party leader, but he is very influential to the extent that his statement is a fatwa. None of the other leaders now in Iraq, including Sayyid Muqtada Sadr, when Sayyid Muqtada Sadr issues a statement, it cannot be considered as a religious fatwa. So the followers are not religiously entitled to follow the instructions, but they do follow the instructions because they consider themselves as followers of this leader, not in terms of being religiously bound to follow this fatwa. The only person whose statements are considered religious fatwas is Ayatollah Sistani and other religious leaders, of course. But here we have Ayatollah Sistani as a clear guardian of the whole political process, a person whose office has always been part of the guidance, giving either guidelines or instructions to the political players in Iraq. That's why he's part of the political process. But he is not himself a political leader. As for Masoud Barzani, by the way, he is not following any religious method. Naqshbandi, or these are names of spiritual methods. Masoud Barzani is best known as a secular leader. He's a Sunni Muslim, but he's secular. The legacy of his father, the tribal affiliation, and he is often seen as a person who represents or who is defending the Kurdish dream of having a Kurdish national state. That's why he enjoys this kind of support, and he's not disputed as a leader inside the Kurdistan region. He's disputed as a leader who may represent Kurdistan in Baghdad, but not as a leader who can have this authority inside the Kurdistan region. And again, whether the influence is attached or is part of the historical background of a person or no, because al-Maliki during his 2 terms was very, very influential to the extent that he gained the first time for one of the Shia leaders in this political process to gain or to win more than 90 seats. That was al-Maliki in his second term. But he failed to be the leader in inspiring or the Shia, all the Shia population. He was, and he is still now seen as just a political leader who can succeed or fail. But for Sayyid Muqtada Sadr, for example, no. Even if he fails in politics, the number of his followers is the same. It doesn't decrease. They don't lose faith in him, even if he withdraws from politics. The same is applicable with Ayatollah Sistani. But when it comes to political participation, even followers of Ayatollah Sistani might not be following his statement, because he called for vast and very large participation in the recent elections, but we have seen that there was a low turnout. Most of the Shia have not gone to the ballots to cast their votes. It means they didn't consider this as a fatwa. They just considered it as an advice for them. And an advice is not just like a religious fatwa. A religious fatwa is mandatory. A political advice is still an advice. So people can differentiate between what should be done as a religious fatwa and as a political advice or an instruction. That's why, I mean, the way of influence or power is really complex to follow or to trace or to see its influence in the political arena or the political scene.
One short question, Dr. Dhiaa, one short question. Could you imagine that these 3 veto stakeholders sit together, agree on a different political system or on key changes of the constitution, and all actors in the Iraqi society would accept this?
2 of them can sit, and they have already sat, but one of them can never sit. Ayatollah Sistani will never sit with political leaders and try to, define or design what the political process should be. But Masoud Barzani, Sayyid Muqtada Sadr, and others will sit because they are political leaders. At the same time, they are religious. Sayyid Muqtada Sadr is a religious leader. Masoud Barzani is an ethnic or tribal leader, but Ayatollah Sistani is seeing himself as a person who is a spiritual leader, who is not really concerned immediately with the political process, because he knows very well that this can change and these players can go and be replaced by other players. So he wants to maintain this equal distance with all players, because he sees himself as the father of the whole country.
Thank you.
Isn't it considered to be a problem that there is no Sunni or representative of the Sunni? How nice is about it?
Actually, there are many representatives of the Sunni community, but the Sunni community representatives themselves say that we are leaders for power positions. We are brokers for these positions. We want to attain power positions in order to serve our community. Go and form your government and we will be part of it, and tell us what is our share of power. They don't aspire to a religious or a spiritual or a community role like Sayyid Sistani or Sayyid Muqtada Sadr or Masoud Barzani, because they know very well that their project was always a power project, and they were part of a state power during Saddam and even during the monarchy under the British mandate. Most of the Sunnis were thinking of the state as the guardian of their rights, unlike the Shia, who look at the seminary, Najaf seminary, as the guardian of their rights, or the Kurds, who look to their leaders as the guardians of their rights, while the Sunnis always looked at the state, at the nation, as the guardian of their rights.
But also the tribal.
The tribal affiliation is there, but it is not the one that will fulfill their demands or their needs. Not the tribal affiliation. It will not do anything for fulfilling their materialistic, so to speak.